Hello and welcome to the Let That Shift Go podcast. I'm Noel.
And I'm Lena.
And this is where we talk about the good, the bad, and all the shift in between.
We'll just talk mad shift.
Let's get into it. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about shifty relationships.
Oh boy.
When the shift hits the fan in a relationship. And today we actually have a first guest, which is Armando, Lena's husband. And we decided to talk a little bit about relationships and the stages of the relationships. We talked a little bit about this on a previous podcast, talked about Rolemates, Soulmates, and wholemates. But today we want to try something a little bit different, a little story time, and using a little bit of anecdotal stories to kind of tag along with these Rolemates, Soulmates, and wholemates.
Yeah, give some examples. And
see if we can have some examples and really just kind of go through the arc of Lena and Armando's relationship. So, the Rolemates is really, where couples come together as a whole to create a whole that is larger than the sum of their parts, which is a fancy way of saying, we're just trying to figure out how we best navigate this relationship together. Some people are better at different things, and really taking ownership of what you're good at and utilizing your skills and what you bring to the relationship to kind of create some synchronicities in the early parts of a relationship. But that can become competitive at some point. But really what I would like to ask is, like, how did you guys see your relationship? I guess first let's start with maybe a little bit about your relationship. Just kind of briefly tell us how you met and a little synopsis of your relationship.
Well, this is a story we've told many times and never gets old. But actually, Armando and I met 38 years ago, and I was 13. He was 16. We were calling the time. So back then, you would dial 853-1212 on your telephone, corded telephone, and it would tell you what time it was.
At the tone, the time will be 7:53 and 20 seconds.
Exactly.
Yeah, something like that.
So, I was calling the time to go to the mall, and I was, at my girlfriend's house, and the time just kept ringing so that it would never pick up and say what time it was. And so, but I started to hear voices on the line in between rings, and I realized the phone lines had gotten crossed.
Oh, like a party line, yeah.
It was like a party line, yeah. And this was before we knew there was a party line. And you could hear voices in between. And at one point I was like, saying things in between, like, hey. And then somebody would say, hey. And then they'd say, what's your number? And you wait for the ring. And then it wasn't my house, so I gave her out her number. And, there was like 5 boys who called.
No, of course.
And so we took their names, their numbers, their stats, and Armando was one of them, and he told me he was a 6-foot green-eyed Italian named Jerry Montana.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
So he was the first catfishing that had ever been recorded. I did tell him I was 14, so also I lied as well. So yeah, but that's how we met, and we exchanged letters and talked on the phone for months because he wasn't able to drive yet, and then finally we, met up at a Farrell's at
the ice cream shop, birthday place.
Yeah, and met in person for the first time, and that's how it started, and so we went into our relationship very, very young. We had kids very young. I was 17 when we had our daughter Tatiana, and lived on our own since I was 16. So we very early on became Rolemates.
Became adults too.
We became adults very quickly. We figured out who needed to do what and how we're going to make this work. And, we knew we were moving against all odds and in lots of opposition, telling us we wouldn't be able to do it. So we were going to do it in spite of everyone.
Yeah.
And so, I think we had 3 children very young. By the time I was 25, we had 3 kids. And we got very good at Rolemates. I think, Armando knew what he needed to do. I knew what I needed to do.
Armando, did you feel like it was difficult to figure out your role in the relationship, or did it seem pretty natural?
It seemed pretty natural. I mean, when our first daughter was born, Tatiana, it changed everything, because when she was born, I no longer looked at rims and stereo system. It was about going to work and providing. So when I saw that little baby, for the first time, it was like I knew that my life was going to change and I needed to really be more responsible. So it was something that,
Such a role as a provider, kind of.
yes, exactly. So, I mean, got into work and never stopped.
Yeah.
And how, like, the Rolemates, did it ever feel like it was competitive? Is there a certain point where it seemed competitive?
Early on, I don't feel like it felt competitive. It felt more, unless we were competing against everyone else.
Yeah, okay.
But as a team.
Yeah, as a team.
And we both knew what we had to do, and we just kind of put our nose down and we're like, this is how it needs to be done, and we're going to be successful, and we're going to have a home, and we're going to give our kids everything that we didn't have, no matter what. And it really was just, we were so driven by proving everyone wrong.
Yeah.
Would you say?
I agree.
Some focus.
It was more of, the odds were stacked against us. Everybody thought that, we were going to, not make it. And so we both had our roles, and our roles were to make sure that we could make it without any help. So we never really asked for any help. We both had our roles, and that was taking care of the kids and working.
Yeah.
What did you see, Armando?
And making everything look very perfect.
Yeah.
That was a big deal, is that everything had to look on the outside like it was perfect.
Did you have things, Mondo, that you seen that Lena was like she was the strength of, it was her strengths, and she was handling X, Y, and Z, and you knew that you were doing this? Were those things clearly defined for you, or were you guys figuring those things out as you were?
I think we were figuring it out. I knew one thing for sure was that she was a really good mother. Even for being 17 years old, she knew exactly what she needed to do. Even if it meant getting immunization shots or whatever, she'd stand in line at the free clinic, and she did whatever it took to make sure that our kids were well taken care of, and so I never worried when I went to work. She was on top of it.
How about you, Lena? Same question. Did he...
Yeah, Armando was always extremely hardworking. Like whatever needed to get done to feed the children, he would do.
Yeah, he always gave that provider.
Yeah, we were a good team. We knew what our roles were, and we saw to it. And it was a lot of proving a lot of people wrong, but that became almost like an obsession.
Yeah,
and to our detriment at some point, financially and emotionally. Just trying to upkeep this outward appearance of things always being perfect was not necessarily healthy. I think later on in the relationship, and
you think that's when. I don't know. It's hard to say what like competitive, comes in, but it doesn't really feel like we start to wonder, well, she's not doing as much as I am. I'm out working all day.
Yeah.
And, I know she's taking care of the kids and stuff, but she has no idea what I'm in. Like the inner dialogue is going on. I know I can only speak for my side, because I definitely had those thoughts, even though, we're both doing our thing and both working and doing whatever.
Yeah.
And everybody's contributing. But I think at a certain point we start to feel an inequity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think because we don't think the other person understands how hard we have it on our end. And certainly I would say that went on both ways.
Yeah. Not being seen.
Yeah.
Or
and
understood.
Just being really unaware too, of like what's going on for the other person, because you just kind of see it from your own point of view. And of course I was like, you don't know what I'm doing for the kids, and this is my responsibility, is to take care of everything for them. And, you get to go to work, but I'm stuck here kind of, all I'm talking to is people under the age of 3, all day long. And as soon as he would come home, it's like, entertain me, talk to me, and he's like, I've been working all day.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of like not being able to see the other person's side of how hard it was for them, and in comparison to how hard your day was. But yeah, I don't want to speak for Armando, but that I definitely think that I didn't have a complete understanding of how hard it was for him to go and work, at sometimes leaving at 5 a.m., not coming home until 7 p.m.
Yeah.
But then on my side, I'm like, you don't know what I'm doing here at home all day.
Yeah.
But he's like, you've been home all day.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been gone for 14 hours. What have you accomplished? I've painted 5 houses and done X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, you just had to make grilled cheese. I don't know what's wrong, So definitely just not being able to, see each other's side that was something for sure. If you want to talk about like a competitiveness,
Mhm.
it's like mine is harder than yours. My role is harder, or I'm working harder. And
Is that something that kind of triggered you to want to go back and get your education to also provide, or was it the inequity? Did it become partially because you didn't feel like you were contributing like Armando was, or that part was competitive?
yeah, you know what? There's some ring of truth there. I think I always wanted to go back to school. I had to leave school in the 10th grade.
Mm.
And, once my kids were in school, there was always this need to I've always been a seeker of wanting to know more and learn more.
Yeah, you are a student.
Yeah, I'm definitely a student. And, there was this, I want to be able to provide too. I want to be able to say when I want to spend money that I don't have to ask for permission, because that was, that kind of felt like a thing.
Yeah. Did you have Amanda, did you have a problem or I wouldn't say problem, but did it affect you in any way, recognizing that she maybe wanted to go back into the workforce or go get her education and then going out and working? Did it make you feel anything?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that if Lena could probably agree with me, is that was where the first crack started in our marriage, was the fact that I didn't realize how controlling I was. And so I looked at her wanting to get ahead and go back to school as a thing where I looked at it like, I'm working. Again, this goes back to like competing against whose job is more important.
Mm-hmm.
And because I felt at the time that my work was directly related to getting paid, and hers was more, we're saving money by not getting daycare. And so all these little things started coming in, the fear of losing control over what she was going to do. And so I would act out and make it about something else. So I would say like, you want to go back to school for what? You're going to take away from the kids' college education. And so, Lena really started to, at that point, start to push. And she would never push before. I think it was because she had a lot of respect for me when I would come home from work and tired. But I think that at that particular time when she decided to go back to school, she really was growing, and that was really uncomfortable for me. So she really pushed back. So she can tell you a little bit more about that.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can tell a little about that. Yeah, I think that there was a point where I knew I was going to have to assert myself, because it no longer felt okay for me to just kind of submit.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that was sort of going against the grain of my personality and who I was naturally. In fact, for many years during that time, I was depressed and took antidepressants for like 10 years. And that really was like to just numb this voice inside of me that was like, wanting to go back to school or wanting to do more. And it's like I took the medicine so I just wouldn't feel anything. And at some point I thought, this is actually really numbing. Like I don't feel anything good and I don't feel anything bad. And I knew at that point, like, this is not
stuck.
For me. Yeah. This isn't how I'm supposed to live. And so I didn't want to do that anymore. And that's really probably when I started to assert myself more and say, I want to go back and get an education. I was really interested in psychology. I was working, like volunteering with CASA kids, and, just was really interested in human behavior. And at that point, I started to push and say, I'm going to go to school against everyone's wishes, which is what it felt like.
Except for your own.
Except for my own. It's like I had to listen and finally hear my own voice, which was really scary. And, I started to push back and really started to just kind of, I would say in some ways, just sabotage and destroy my own relationship in order to get out.
Yeah.
And that's really what happened. And that, of course, incited things in Armando with more, wanting to control, feeling that loss of control, because it's really scary when you can't control the other person who I would say you feel like is in charge of your happiness.
And both of you were feeling unseen and unheard.
Yeah, very.
At that time.
Yeah.
Because at that point, you weren't able to communicate those. What you're articulating now wasn't easy to communicate at that time to him.
Oh, yeah. It was
and
really
Armando,
hard.
Vice versa. Yeah. Back to you.
It was really hard. And there was a point when I knew, I know it sounds dramatic, but that I thought, if I stay, I'll die.
Yeah.
Because the only way for there to be room for me in this house is to not be me.
Mm.
And that was a really scary place.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel like I had a choice.
And that was kind of a watershedding moment for you. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, it was a big pivot.
Yeah. And so you ended up going to school and getting your degree and graduating from nursing school.
Yeah.
And then going out and working in the field, which was something new, because I think you worked a little bit in the hospital in some capacity.
I'd worked in the hospital since I was 18.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just finally went, into nursing school. And that was, after wanting to go really into psychology, but realizing like I may have to support myself.
Yeah.
And this may be the only way for me to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, Mondo, you watching essentially your wife step into a new role, right? Kind of doing some self-love and really taking care of herself and becoming self-sufficient in a way and gaining some independence by having her own income. That I knew for me as a male, and especially the way that I used to think, it was like, I provide and you, if you have to work, then that means I'm not providing enough and all those things. And I want to be the provider and make sure that you can stay home with all the kids. And you mentioned earlier, it did have some impact on you, and you also mentioned that was kind of right where the crack started when she started to shift into trying to find a higher purpose or another purpose for her goals and her
Yeah, absolutely.
life.
During the time she was going to school, it was extremely difficult because I would make the excuse of that if she was doing her homework or something or doing something else, you're taking away from time with the kids or you're not making the meals. And it was really just my own way of acting out, knowing that I'm right now at this very moment losing control over over Lena. Yeah. And so, looking back now, obviously I wasn't as self-aware as I am now. And back, it was just really basically putting all of my self-worth in Lena. She was my everything. Like at the time. So her doing that was like almost an act of like betrayal because, who is she to do this? I'm the one that provides. And I felt like at that moment, she doesn't need me anymore. So that was the biggest thing, was realizing that I felt like she doesn't need me anymore. And so who am I?
Yeah.
So, yes.
So that's what kind of started that crack in the relationship. And eventually you got to a point where it was too uncomfortable to stay the same.
Yeah. Wanting to grow and like there was no room in that pot that I was in, to grow in the ways that I felt I was going to need to grow. Became very uncomfortable, So although we always loved each other, we just kind of got to the point where we knew like, I don't see how we can live together.
How many years into the relationship was this?
Gosh, about 20.
Yeah.
Wow.
20. Yeah.
That's a long time. I mean, most relationships don't even, marriages don't last that long.
I think it's around 20 years that we were actually together. And I remember just waking up, I don't want to tell this story that, it was like, I was really into like just kind of, not really self-help, but like more of a self-awareness path. And, reading a lot of different books. And, we had gone down a very religious path together before that. And I started to read more like, more Eckhart Tolle or Conversations with God, and really started opening up my mind and really becoming interested in, other knowledge and really being a seeker. And I remember feeling terrible about that because I thought, gosh, what's wrong with me that I always want to learn more and know more. And I remember waking up one night and he was praying over my head, and I woke up and I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, well, I'm praying over your mind, for the demons, like to leave you. And I was like, what? Yeah. Like I feel terrible for you that you believe that. That's a terrible thing to believe. Like I wasn't even mad. I just really kind of felt like, wow, that must be like not a good place to be in, that you think you have to wake up and pray over your spouse's head
Yeah.
so that they can be okay, you know?
Yeah. In context, it makes a little sense, but out of context, it's like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think slowly that was just like this evolution of us knowing, like, you know what? We can't both exist in this relationship and be happy.
Yeah.
Like, I will have to stop being who I am, or you will have to stop being who you are. And I'm not sure either of us can do that.
Yeah.
And so that's when we actually decided, like, amicably, like, this is done.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like,
Before you guys keep hurting each other.
yeah, because we're going to end up resenting each other and being in this house where we start to argue and argue in front of our children, or, you know, whatever. And for me, I had to ask myself, like, is this the relationship that I would want to emulate for my daughters?
Yeah.
Because while their dad is an amazing man, like, you know, he's such a good father and he's a good man, but do I really want them to learn, like, you need to shut up who you are in order to be in a relationship? Like, you need to abandon yourself
Yeah.
in order to be in a relationship. And the only way I could answer that was no. I don't want them to learn that. And so I can't emulate it,
Yeah.
you know? And so that was the point where I was like, I think that we need to separate. And that's, you know, that's what we did.
And you guys were separated for a while.
Yeah. We separated twice, like literally living in two separate homes. And we were, you know, separated for at least 2.5 years.
Yeah, 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
Yeah.
And we always got along. You know, we always tried to like care for each other and about each other.
Yeah, you guys
from
would
a
show up to my
distance.
house to Thanksgiving together, and I was so confused because I so wanted you guys to be together.
Yeah.
But I was like, maybe they're getting together, but you guys were like, no.
Yeah, it was very confusing for everyone.
Yeah.
And especially for our kids, I'm sure, because we got along.
Yeah.
We really like each other. We just knew, like, I can't live with you. And in fact, I would think, okay, well, when like I'm like 75 and if I did remarry, maybe my spouse would be dead
Yeah.
and then we would get back together. And same for him, you know, like when I don't know. I just thought at some point we'll probably be back together, but not right now,
Yeah.
you know.
And
My fantasy was, you know, seeing our daughters get married, and then we would have to, you know, dance together, and then all of a sudden you could feel the spark again. And
Oh, yeah.
what's going to happen if we're both in relationships?
Oh, here's my nightmare. I would go to my kid's wedding and he's there with his new wife and I'm over there in the corner eating all the ranch.
See,
Feeling like-
he had a dream of dancing and getting back with you,
Yeah.
and you had a nightmare
I'm like,
of
I'm
him
gonna be
coming
the
with another
lonely,
person.
weird lady who's eating
Yeah.
all the ranch dip, and he's
Yep. Yep. So the Rolemates eventually, because you stayed in Rolemates for so long, from what we've read, it's basically staying in that stuck position. If you stay there too long, eventually it becomes destructive.
yeah.
Yeah. And
There's no growth.
Yeah,
Or
'cause
there's no room
growth.
for growth.
Yeah. And so you need to try to make that shift into soulmates. And really you guys started making that shift while you guys were separated from each other, because you were doing individual healing on yourselves. And specifically you, Lena, you were really going on that self-awareness path and
Yeah.
and doing a lot of self-help things. And you went to India, you went to Africa, and you did all kinds of.
Oh, yeah. I was like on the path of anything you told me I can't do, because that happened a lot, you know, in our relationship, is you can't do this, you can't do that.
Yeah.
I was like, everything you told me I can't do, I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And to prove to myself that I can do anything. And so
Yeah.
it was just like this hell-bent, nonstop, you know, seeking of what are the things I don't think I can do. I'm going to do them, like climb Mount Kenya. Well,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to do that, you know, or I'm going to go to India, or I'm going to do. And so there was a lot of that, me proving to myself who I was outside of someone else's version of me, because I had never actually been a woman. I had been a daughter and a wife and never actually been a woman. And so I had to see, who was this woman, you know, and in order to be anybody's soulmate, I had to figure out what is my soul? What is my soul's mission? Who am I as a soul? Separate from somebody else's version of me.
Yeah.
And so that was really important. And I know it was really important for Mondo too, to kind of get to see himself. And I'd like to hear more about, really what happened for you during that time.
Well, for me, it was a complete opposite. I mean, you were on the path of discovering yourself, traveling. Mine was, here's a single man now and never dated before. So now I'm on the dating scene. So it was just, I went full board on just partying and a lot of drinking, and realizing that I was only doing those things to hide the pain that I was in. So it got to a point where it was a New Year's. I was with our oldest daughter, and it was New Year's. We spent New Year's together, and I at that moment realized, I need to start, my life. So I said, from this point on, I'm going to focus on myself, and if I get into a relationship, then so be it. But it was, and so I did. That New Year's came and focused on work, and I met somebody and was in a relationship, and in that relationship, I realized that I was capable of love, but I realized that there's different levels of love, and it taught me a lot in that relationship, in the respect that I could see some of the patterns that were once there that weren't there anymore, because it had already happened to me. So all of the things that, because women love to be independent, so I realized that I was changing because the relationship I was in was also evolving in a way. And so, we were in it for about a year and a half, and we decided to move in together. But Lena and I hadn't really finalized the paperwork, because we kind of messed up the date. So we ended up seeing a mediator. And so we had to, have the mediator go through and do the paperwork. And the girlfriend that I had at the time was really pressing on, when are you going to go get the paperwork done? When are you going to get it done? So I
Thank you for that.
And so I called Lena and go, hey, look, we need to get this done now. It's really getting to be where she's getting very annoyed. And so we went to see the mediator, and we both sat down. We hadn't seen each other in, gosh, how long?
I mean, it'd been months since we actually spent time together, but we had to meet a couple times before.
But no quality time.
No quality time.
Yeah.
So
no.
So she gave us the paperwork, and we both signed them. And she looked at us and said, "Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and make copies, and I'll be right back." So she left to go make copies, and we looked at each other in this awkward look. And then she looked at me, and I could see something about her eyes. And she looked at me and she said, "Are we doing the right thing?" And of course, my natural response would have been, "Of course, what are you talking about?" And I didn't. What came out of my mouth was not what I thought it was going to come out. It was, no. I mean, are we doing the right thing? No, we're not doing the right thing. And so, she came back with the paperwork, and we both looked at each other and told her that to hold on to the paperwork. And, and so we decided to talk about what just happened.
Yeah. I felt like a portal opened, and like time stood still for some reason. And I just said, "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Like as if like I was between two worlds.
Yeah.
And that wasn't something I'd ever said to him before, in the 2.5 years or however much time it was.
Yeah, 2.5 years.
But
in that moment.
Yeah, I just said,
together.
"Oh my gosh," like it was just like a click in my head, like, "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" And if he would have said, "Yes, of course we are," like I probably would have went, "Oh, okay." I would have like probably snapped out of it, like, "Yeah, what was I thinking?"
Yeah.
Of course. But it's like we both just went into this weird tunnel and went, "No, how'd we get here?"
Yeah.
And then, we just said, "Okay, just hold on." And she said, "Well, you still have 30 days. Like it's another 30 days before you have to come back and finish this."
Yeah.
And we're like, "Okay, that's fine." So we left, and we just were like, "What does this mean?" And, we weren't sure.
Yeah.
We just talked about it, and we're like, "Okay, we got to make sure that we're not just being, impulsive, or anything. And we're not telling anybody that we've even had this conversation because it's not the time to pull your kids in.
Yeah, I didn't know about it. Nobody knew about it.
Nobody knew. Our kids were doing great, and they knew where we were at and where their dad was and where I was, and I had dated and we were like living completely separate lives.
Yeah.
We have moved on.
We had both moved on, yeah. And only because, we had to get together to do this that it even brought our attention back to each other.
Yeah.
So, we took some time and we just started to just open up the conversation.
But you're forgetting the most important part.
What?
Well, after we left there, we started talking, and then I had just moved in.
Oh, yeah.
So
he had just moved into a house with her, with the girlfriend. And I was like, well, he's going to have to figure that out. Like, I'm not saying a word or saying like, you need to do this because that is not for me to do. And I don't want to be the person who's doing that. Like, he has to make his own decisions.
Yeah, well played.
But his actions will speak volumes,
you
know, because I am not going to be the side bitch, you know what I mean? So, I went home and for some reason I got out our old letters. I had a box of all of our old letters that we had sent to each other when I was like 13, 14. And
of course you still have that stuff.
I still had it. And I looked at them and I started to read them and I was like, oh my gosh, how did we get so far off course from what was there? This relationship that had budded so young and so early.
So powerful.
And, just started reading through them and I just felt like a bus had just, I was about to step off of the curb and the bus almost hit me.
Yeah.
Like you almost lost all of it.
Yeah.
And just had this moment of like this, regret or like almost regret. I don't know what you would call it.
Yeah.
And so, I called him and I told him, my gosh, I was reading our letters and, you should probably read them. And so he came over and we read the letters and then we just cried.
Oh,
and
man.
cried. And so, by that Monday, he asked her to leave without any prompting from me, by the way.
Yeah.
Which I didn't realize it was a test. So
It wasn't. It was. Yeah, I guess it was a test.
Yeah.
I wasn't even sure what passing would look like. But then we dated each other for about 5 months.
5 or 6 months.
Yeah, in secret.
And we saw a counselor.
And we went to a counselor. And we're like making sure we're not doing something out of fear. Are we just afraid of something, or are we making old mistakes? Or are we ready? Have we kind of cleared up the garbage enough? I knew who I was, and there was no way you were moving me from who I was because I was so assured in that footing. And he knew he could be happy without me, which was such a big point because I was not the source of all his happiness. And that was a big problem for us.
Yeah.
And so he knew he could be happy without me. And so we could finally be two people, two whole people choosing to be together.
Yeah.
Not because we had a child at 17
yeah.
and we had to prove to the world that we were good, but because we actually would choose to be together without having to be together.
Yeah.
So that was the big difference.
And that really is the arc of the Rolemates. And we'll take a break here and pause because in the next episode, we're going to touch on the Soulmates. So stay tuned, to be continued. On next week's episode, we're going to touch into Soulmates and with Lena and Armando.
It's going to be good.
It is.
All right, that's been another episode of Let That Shift Go podcast.
We're going to
I'm Noel.
And I'm Lena. Let us know what your questions are, and we'd love to use them on a future episode. Or check us out on Insta at Let That Shift Go, or visit our website, serenitycovetemecula.com.